This is a new series where I review your guys' college recruiting situations and tell you what I would do if I was in your shoes. You're going to see different grad classes, you'll see different sports, you'll see parents, you'll see athletes, you'll see all of the above. And if you want me to review your college recruiting situation, then you can click the link in the description. So, first one we're going to do here is going to be Becca. She is a parent, a 2026 soccer player, goalkeeper. They've had back and forth with 11 schools, D1, D2, and D3. They've contacted 115 schools. They have 15 to 16 videos right now, ranging between 30 seconds to 3 minutes. They're currently on YouTube, Field Level, X, and IG. The goal is anywhere from D1 to D3, looking for the best fit for cost, and they prefer to stay in state or close to Texas. And their specific question that they want answered is, how do we get schools to be more serious or call her directly without having to ask for a call? So a couple things that stand out to me when I look at this. So the first thing is they're talking to double digit schools, right? So they're over 10, which is great. That's definitely where you want to be. It's a great starting point, okay? The other thing I want you to notice is that they're right around that 10% reply rate that you hear me talk about often. They've contacted 115 schools. They have 11 schools that they're going back and forth with. Even if they didn't get all of that interest from the 115 that they contacted, I just see time and again that the number of schools that you contact, take 10% of that. That's usually the number of schools that you're talking to, whether you got that interest from email or elsewhere. And so if you could just increase the number of schools that you contact, and this isn't speaking to Becca, but just in general, then you're probably going to increase the amount of exposure and interest that you have. So they contacted a pretty solid number of schools. You see a minimum of 100 is normally what I recommend. They hit 115. I look at the video piece. I see 15 to 16 videos, which is not bad, 30 seconds to 3 minutes. It probably means that they actually have quite a bit of video. They just might not be using it in the best way, that there's probably more that they could get out of that. Okay. So they're looking for D1 to D3, best fit for cost. One thing to note here is if you're going for best fit for cost, D3 is probably not going to be your first option. So you can get academic money at D3s, but you're not going to get athletic money at D3s. And so it's probably not going to be a great fit for you guys. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't be. There might be a school that is a good fit and you can find for a cost-effective option, but it's unlikely. And those D3 schools tend to be smaller schools, private schools, a little bit more expensive, no athletic scholarship, academically competitive. So just might be a little bit challenging there. Now, what I do find really curious is that you prefer to stay in state or close to Texas. So I'm going to assume that you live in Texas, but you've also contacted 115 schools. And I'm wondering how you got to 115 if you're trying to either stay in Texas or close to Texas. Now, maybe that's just what you prefer. And so you're open to going far outside of Texas and you would just prefer to stay close to home. But that was interesting and that stands out to me. So the main question that you have here is, how do we get schools to be more serious or call her directly without having to ask for a call? If you notice, they're talking to 11 schools, so they have generated interest. But what I see from a lot of families is that they generate interest and then they're not sure how to build those relationships with schools. So the relationships fizzle out and then they lose that interest and they have to go back to the beginning, generate more interest, but they haven't solved the problem of learning how to build relationships with coaches. And so they get stuck in this cycle where they generate interest, lose it, generate interest, lose it. And so maybe that's what this family has been experiencing. So the question is, how do we actually build these relationships with coaches and move them up the ladder of interest? So they started emailing back and forth. That's great. Then they started getting on the phone with coaches, maybe a little bit. And they're saying, how do we get more phone calls, a higher level of interest with schools? So the first thing that I'm going to say is, the way that you have your video set up right now is not conducive to doing what I'm about to tell you. So what I would do is you need to continue to provide more evidence that your kid is a good player. If they have not given you an offer yet, or even a visit, or even a phone call yet, it means that you have not proven to them yet that your kid is worth their time. Because if they really were, and they were sure of it, then they would do those things. And so it simply means that you have not provided enough evidence that your kid is one of the best options that they possibly have. So that means that that's exactly what you need to do. Now, evidence comes in a number of different forms. You could have video evidence, you could have statistical evidence, in-person evaluation, a coach recommendation or referral, awards and accomplishments. There's lots of different kinds of evidence. In your case, because your kid plays a skill-based sport, soccer is a skill-based sport, then video is going to be the best piece of evidence outside of in-person evaluation. So what I would say is when you are following up with these schools, which is exactly what you need to do to grow that interest, you should be sending new and more video. And if you find yourself running out of video to send, it's because of the way that you've organized it. It's 30 seconds to 3 minutes. Those are longer videos. A lot of those videos probably have multiple clips in them, right? If you broke those up into individual videos, then you would have lots of follow-ups that you could send, especially because you're in season right now. Right? We're filming this in October. So you're in season. You're able to get video every single week. So you should be sending that video to college coaches. And the point is that you're not asking them for anything. You're not asking them for a call. You're just showing them over and over and over that your kid is worth their time. And that by itself, on its own, is going to hopefully get them over the line. But the thing is that a lot of parents think this happens after 1 or 2 follow-ups. It doesn't. It usually takes place after months of follow-ups, and everyone tries to rush the process. And you can either just ask for a phone call over and over again, usually doesn't work, or you can trust the process, continue to provide evidence over a long period of time, and let coaches get there on their own. Second example here, we got Mateo. He is an athlete. He's a 2025 baseball player. He plays outfield and middle infield. He's been back and forth with 2 schools. Both of them have been Division I. He's contacted 8 schools. He has 1 video that's 2 minutes and 23 seconds. His goal is D1, D2, or JUCO. And his question is, what's the number one thing that he should be doing right now or that he should be focused on? A couple things that I see right off the bat. So he's a 2025. That means he's a senior. He is relatively late in the process. Okay. So this means it's go time. We don't have any time to waste. Even if your kid is a 2026, you don't have any time to waste. It is go time. Okay. So what I'm seeing here is that he has back and forth with 2 schools. So there's some indication that he is a decent player, right? And they're both D1. Now, we don't know what that interest looks like. It might be a high level of interest. It might be a low level of interest, but he's back and forth with a couple schools. So it means there's something there, right? It's just not a lot. But the first thing that I notice here is that he's only contacted 8 schools, right? That's not very many at all. And so if both of those schools, for instance, came from those 8, then that's an incredible reply rate, right? That's a 25% reply rate, which is amazing. And so if he simply increased the number of schools that he contacted, he'd probably increase the number of schools that replied to him. And so if, for instance, instead of contacting 8 schools, he contacted 16, so twice as many, he could expect that he'd probably be talking to 4 schools instead of 2, right? And so if we just continue to increase the number of schools that he contacts, it's likely that he's going to get more interest. So that's the first thing I see is that number of contacted schools really needs to be closer to 50 would be like a bare minimum, and 100 would be great. Right. Families, we see this over and over again. Families we work with who have the most amount of interest in offers, they tend to contact the most amount of schools. They tend to have the most amount of video. They tend to contact the most divisions, right? So I would say that's the first thing that stands out. The second thing is that he has 1 video that's 2 minutes and 23 seconds long. One thing about this is that, and we just saw this with Becca, even if you're able to generate interest using this video, which a lot of coaches don't want to see a 2 or 3 minute highlight video. They just get too many of these things. But even if they see that first video and they like it, they're probably not going to be ready to give you an offer yet. And if you only have 1 video, then you don't really have any follow-up material. You don't have anything to send those coaches, because what are you going to do? You're going to send the same video over and over and over again? Probably not. And so we need to break up that video and get more of it so that we have lots of follow-up ammunition over the coming months, so that once we get interest from schools, we can actually turn that interest into offers. I love that the goal is D1, D2, and JUCO, because you could even go to a JUCO and then transfer later on. So I love that you keep that option there. I would also say you should probably explore some D3 or NAIA schools. If you're not an academic kid, don't worry about D3 schools, but NAIA schools, they give pretty decent scholarships. They're 4-year schools, like should be something that's at least on your radar, especially for baseball. I played with a few guys in pro ball who went to NAIA schools. So it's not like it's bad competition. So just something that I'll throw out there. So your question, Mateo, is what's the number one thing that I should be doing right now? There are two things. The first thing you should do is contact way more schools. Okay. Way more coaches need to know that you exist. Right now, just with contacting 8 schools, you already have 2 interested schools. If we can just increase that number of coaches who know you exist, we will likely increase the number of schools that you're having back and forth dialogue with. The second thing is that you only have one video. I want you to go get more video. Okay. I want you to get as much video as you possibly can. I know that you are in the fall season right now. You may or may not be playing some fall ball. If you are, get video from that fall ball. Okay. Regardless, you should take the video that you have and also break it up into individual clips so that you have lots of follow-up ammunition that you can send to college coaches. Those are the two things that are going to most impact your process right now. And I wouldn't wait on them because you're a little bit later in the process. Okay. Now we go to Thomas. Okay, Thomas is a 2027 basketball player. He's a guard. He's had back and forth with 2 schools, both D1, which is a little interesting considering that coaches are probably not supposed to be talking to him yet. He's contacted 15 schools. He has 2 videos. One is 2 minutes. The other one is 30 seconds. His goal is an athletic scholarship of some kind. And his question is, should I send coaches my JV film if I am only a sophomore? So a couple things about this. So he's a 2027 basketball player. Anybody that knows us knows we don't work with men's basketball players. But even if we did, we would not work with him yet because he's 2027, right? He's still a little bit early, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that he could be doing to advance his recruiting process. So as a 2027, a couple things that stand out here. Same as Mateo, I'm seeing only 15 contacted schools. I know that you are still early as a 2027. You don't need to hit as many schools as a 2027, but I would still hit more than 15. For your sophomore year, I would shoot for roughly 50. Okay. And then as you get closer to your legal recruiting date and leading up into junior year, that's when I would ramp that number up to about 100. Same thing. You have 2 videos. One is 2 minutes. One's 30 seconds. Break those videos up. Go get more video. We need as much video as we possibly can. Okay. We've seen this over and over again. Athletes who have more video get more interest. Remember that. Athletes who have more video get more interest. We see it over and over and over again. So your question is, should I send coaches my JV film if I am only a sophomore? And my answer to you would be yes, but it is probably not going to do much for you. So you can do that. You can send coaches your JV film, and it is not going to hurt you. It's not that college coaches are going to see the JV film and then go, this kid, and choose to never recruit you again. They just might not recruit you at that moment. One way to put this, and I get this question a lot, is, well, maybe I should hold off from contacting coaches because my GPA isn't where I want it to be. Or maybe I should hold off on contacting coaches because my skills aren't where I want them to be, right? And what I would say to that is I would not hold off. Sure, it might be unlikely if you are deficient in some of those areas, but I wouldn't hold off on doing it because there might be a couple schools who still are interested and you want to be able to pick those up. And if your kid gets better in 6 months and reaches back out to those schools, they're not going to say, oh yeah, but 6 months ago you weren't good. So even though you're good now, we're not going to take you. No, they only care about what you can do for them today or in a year, right? And so even if you had a bad first impression, you can still recover that and perform better in the future and show that you're actually capable. So you see this, I'll use a GPA example because I think it makes it really easy. If, for instance, a player has a 3.5 GPA and contacts Harvard, right? And Harvard says, hey, listen, we think that you're a great player. We'd love to have you, but we can't get you in because you only have a 3.5 GPA. And so you go, oh man, I guess I blew my chance with Harvard. But let's say that you got a 4.7 for the next 2 years. I'm making up numbers. I know this isn't always possible. But let's say you get a 4.7 and all of a sudden you have this incredible GPA and you reach back out to Harvard and they still need your kid's position in grad class. And you say, hey, listen, I got my GPA up. It's now where you asked me to get it to. Harvard is not going to go, yeah, I know it's good now, but it wasn't good before. No, they don't care. They just need to get you in now. And they're going to say, okay, awesome, cool. And so the whole point is like, first impressions are good and they're valuable, but they're not everything. You can always double back. And as long as you can prove that right now you're much better than you were before, then a coach might still take you. Right. And so I would still send this film, even if it's not going to get you a ton of interest, even if it's not exactly what college coaches want to see. It's still something that I would do so that you can build the muscle of making videos, sending emails. I think that those are valuable things that will really help you as you start to ramp up toward junior year. Last one we're going to talk about here is Maria. She is a parent of a 2026 football player. He's an offensive lineman. He's had back and forth with one school. It's been a D1 school. They've contacted 150 schools. They have 6 videos, about a minute long, and they're on Huddle. The goal is D1, but they're open to D2 and D3. And the main question, there's a couple questions here, but should I consider a D1 PWO? That's a preferred walk-on, means no scholarship money, but they get a roster spot. If money is not an issue, or try D2, D3. Do they have enough film? And then is it too late? So there's a lot packed into here. Let's start with this. So they have back and forth with one school. It's a D1 school. And if you notice, they have contacted a lot of schools. They've contacted 150 schools. Now, my first question to Maria would be, how are you contacting those schools? So are they sending emails? Like, have they sent 150 emails? Or are they sending DMs and they've sent 150 DMs? Or is it a mix of those two things? Because what I would say is, if you have done 150 on one single platform and you only have back and forth with one school, then there's a couple things that it could be. The first is that you might need to try a different platform, specifically because her kid plays football. I can tell you that football almost exclusively uses Twitter for recruiting. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't send emails for football. You absolutely should. We do. And a lot of times what happens is we send those emails and then they go follow the kids on social media, on Twitter, right? But if you are a football player or your kid plays football, you need to prioritize Twitter more than anything else. This is specific to football. If your kid doesn't play football, this does not apply to you as much. Okay. You should still use social media. It's a great tool, but you don't need to put the same emphasis on it. Football players need to have Twitter dialed in if they want to put themselves on college coaches' radars. It's just where it happens. And so if you've contacted 150 schools via email, I would say you need to go send DMs to coaches. And likewise, if you have sent a bunch of DMs, I would go try email. Even if a lot of recruiting happens on Twitter for football, I would still try email, because maybe you can get in their ear using email and then they go follow you on Twitter and you can continue the conversation there. But there's something going on, because if you've contacted 150 schools and it looks like you don't really have much interest or many back and forths, then I would say that something is missing. It means that college coaches are not opening your emails, or it means they're not clicking on the video, or which both of those you need to solve, right? If they're landing in spam, you have to solve that. Otherwise, they're not seeing the emails. Or if they're getting the emails, but they're not clicking on the video, then there's something in the email that's keeping them from clicking on the video. And if they're getting all the way to the video, but they're not responding, then it means that they probably don't think that your kid is a good fit for their school, right? And so that could mean that you're emailing or reaching out to schools that maybe he's not quite capable of playing. If you've contacted 150 D1 schools and he's a D2 or D3 caliber player, then it would make sense that you wouldn't have a ton of interest, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind, and how I would think about that. But 150 is enough volume that you should see something. And if you haven't, it means that there's an inefficiency in the system that has to be fixed or changed. Now, when we look at the video piece, because you ask, hey, do we have enough film? So you have 6 videos. They're a minute each. That's about 6 minutes worth of video. He's an offensive lineman. I will say there's like only so much that you can show as an offensive lineman. You can show run plays, you can show pass plays, you can show pancakes. Like, you might be able to show strength in the weight room, but there's only so many things that you can showcase for that. So I'm not too concerned about having 6 minutes of video and having those each be like 6 videos. I think this is actually a unique situation where you might not need to break it up as much, but keep in mind, if you don't have lots of shorter clips, it's going to be harder to continue to build relationships with coaches over time, as we've talked about with a couple other examples in this video. So I would, it's okay to leave the video as is, as long as you feel like you still have enough follow-ups and you're continuing to get more video week in and week out, because he's in season right now. So you should be getting video every Friday night, right? So, do you have enough film? My guess is that you have enough film right now. You probably have enough film right now, but what I would say is that you need to go get more film throughout the season, because once you hit winter and spring, you're not going to be having as much video coming through anymore because you won't be in season. And so you want to stockpile as much video as you possibly can for those droughts where you're not going to be getting season video, right? Also, it is not too late. 2026 football player, you're definitely not too late. For D1, sure, a little more challenging, and that on that you're going to want to move faster. But certainly for D2, D3, you are not late. And even for D1, there are lots of D1 spots that are still open. So no, you are not too late. Now, the first and primary question here that you ask is, should I consider a D1 preferred walk-on if money is not an issue, or try D2, D3? There is not a right answer to this question. It's more about what is best for the kid and for the family. So money is not an issue. So this is all about best fit. It's not about the scholarship. And so the real question is, what kind of experience does your kid want to have? Would they rather go to a D1 school where they're a preferred walk-on, they never play, but they get to go to a huge school that's a big football school, they get the whole experience of being on the football team, but they're not playing? Or do you think that your kid would rather go to a D2 or D3 smaller school? Football is not as big of a deal, but they get to play every single game, right? And so there's not a right answer there. Some people would pick the first situation and someone pick the second. There's not a right answer. It's whatever's right for your kid and your family. And so I personally would engage all of those opportunities. I would generate as much interest and as many opportunities as I could from D1, D2, and D3. And then at the end of the process, you'll sit there with all the opportunities that you have and say, great, what are the pros and cons of each one of these, and which one gives my kid the experience that they're looking for? And that will become much easier to decide when you have options in front of you. When you don't have options in front of you yet, it's sort of an ethereal idea. It's not tangible. It's hard to envision what that actually looks like because there's nothing to compare, because you don't have interest or offers yet. Once you get to that point, you're going to have phone calls with coaches and you're going to say, oh, I trust and like that guy a lot more than the other guy, right? That would be a check. Or you'd be like, we visited that campus. I really didn't like that one, but I really did like that one. And you'll have a check for that one too. And so it'll be much easier to compare these different options when you have concrete ones in front of you. And I think at that point, it'll probably be much more clear as to what you should do. And so I would not make a decision on that right now, but I would highly consider or I would highly encourage you to consider all options and keep all options open until you actually sign on the dotted line and decide what is best for you. So I hope you guys like this video. If you like this video, let me know down below if you want me to do more of these. And of course, if you want your recruiting situation to be considered, fill out the form that is in the description, and I will talk to you guys soon.